After studying this module, you shall be able to understand how community psychology grew into a discipline, the various disciplines and developments that have had an influence on its conception. You will be able to learn about what lies at the heart of this discipline, what it is or intends to be. You will also be able to know about value based research, and lastly, you will also be able to identify what is needed for community psychology to grow into a strong applied science.
After studying this module, you shall be able to know a brief history of the development of community psychology, identify the various disciplines that have had an effect or have contributed to community psychology, evaluate community psychology as a transdisciplinary approach with its research and action influenced by various individual and social structures. Analyze the current needs for community psychology to grow as an indispensable applied science. Introduction. Community psychology is a linking science and practice. It uses the knowledge and craftsmanship of different areas and disciplines and the professional capabilities of specialist practitioners as well as the practical wisdom of neighborhood groups and of everyday life. It is a distinctive field of study which values social justice, individual and collective happiness and well-being. Although a thoroughly applied science, community psychology is still growing, and in this module we will see how it has originated in various parts of the world through various fields, and all of these fields have had a significant contribution to its development. Later, we will discuss the concept of a linking science and its implications. The multicultural birth of community psychology. Community psychology is a relatively new approach towards mental health, as Spielberger and Isco 1970 aptly define it. Community psychology represents a new frontier in the study of human behavior, which is broadly concerned with clarifying the complex interrelationships between individuals and the environment. This new frontier is defined by a paradigm shift from a purely intrapsychic outlook to one which recognizes the influence of community faculties on human behavior. This discipline has developed over the years with the contribution of many developments in the field of social sciences over the years. If we attempt to map the development of community psychology over the years, we see that it has been molded into different shapes by different cultures. In the United States of America, the conception of community psychology is attributed to the Conference on Education of Psychologists for Community Mental Health in 1965 at Swampscott, Boston. As per the report by Anderson et al. 1966, this conference emphasized on the need for both the study and treatment of individuals within a community context. Specific areas where community research was needed were identified. importance of the study of man in the community, including the effects of varying physical and social environments upon his functioning both as an individual and as a member of social organization, and examination of the effect of social organization upon the individual, particularly those creating high risk populations and alternative social patterns which may serve to reduce their creation, were expressed. This conference was a clear expression of the need for a new conception about the nature of mental illness and the need to study the clearly visible effect of environmental structure on individual psyche. The development of community psychology in Australia and New Zealand, on the other hand, was started a little later than North America in the 1970s. Here, the discipline was shaped by the ideas of social responsibility, social justice, and cultural and ethnic issues, including combating the oppression of the respective indigenous populations. Community psychology was molded into a political mold in Latin America. The discipline grew out of dissatisfaction with social psychology in its irrelevance to real life problems and its conceptual barrenness in relation to the understanding of person society relations. This politically aware new approach was better suited to the popular majorities, and this is practically applicable approach. In Europe and Britain, community psychology saw a new conception in different countries. Overall, a clear influence of social, environmental, educational, clinical, and health psychology was seen. However, in India, community psychology has seen a delayed development dating just over a decade. This discipline in India is governed by research and work done by departments of social work. Basis for a linking science and practice. Multiple origins of community psychology. Community psychology has traditionally been a field of study that focuses on the interactive relationship between the individual and the social structure he stays in. This new approach is born out of many developments in the past and is still in the process of becoming a widely acknowledged applied science. Community psychology in the United States was developed due to disenchantment with the field of clinical psychology. Jim Kelly, in an interview in 1997, expressed how he was dissatisfied with the role of a clinical psychologist and was keen on the concepts of social psychology but not the methods it applied. He sought a bridge between the two, which was made possible by a research grant for research into a new field called community mental health. He observed how social structures had a profound effect on both the individual and his behavior. Community psychology has been influenced by many developments in the past. As discussed earlier, these developments took place in different parts of the world and had a varied effect on the discipline and its definition. To name a few, community organizing and the community mental health movement in the US, conscientization and action research in Latin America. Mary Jehoda's groundbreaking long term study on the effects of unemployment on the community or the Italian democratic psychiatric movement in Europe has influenced many community psychologists. Equivalently, many political movements like civil rights students movement of the 60s, women's liberation gay movement, equal right for handicapped persons, survivors of psychiatric hospitals and many more have had considerable impact on research and practice of community psychology. Applied science versus community psychology. Community psychology is unique in its focus and yet its ideas have not been implemented into mainstream research and education. It is a purely applied science, but it does not hold an influential standing among other large disciplines of psychology. Differentiating amongst traditional applied psychology and community psychology is essential as such an analysis clearly shows how community psychology is a linking science through and through. It focuses on interdependent relationship between the individual and the community, structures within the community and the individual and the society as a whole. It also links research practices of various disciplines of science like anthropology, sociology, philosophy, law, and so on. Lastly, it links organizations and structures within the community to be able to apply the findings. The linking metaphor. By linking, it is meant that community psychology connects aspects of various disciplines and social structures in its research and practice. It helps in defining the scope and purpose of the discipline and explain what do community psychologists do. Community psychology as a linking science is a discipline which is transdisciplinary in the sense that in the context of research and evaluation, various concepts, theories, methods and measures from various disciplines are combined into a new shared conceptual framework. This approach moves beyond the limitations of any single disciplinary focus and creates new synergistic ways of conducting research and evaluation and addressing critical public health issues. As a linking practice, community psychology brings together multiple stakeholders, some of whom are often overlooked to address community issues. For example, incorporation of mental health into primary healthcare initiatives such that mental issues are not only looked at without stigmatization but also incorporating preventive approach of primary healthcare initiatives to help cater to mental health issues. Discovering empowering patterns. For the dynamics of empowerment process to be able to enhance well-being and growth of not only in individuals but also in social systems, it is important to link the different level of empowerment such as individual, group and organization. The discourse on empowerment processes in community psychology has been influential for many practical areas in community mental health and social work, psychiatry, community development and organizational science. Presencing. The concept of presencing refers to the expansion of our knowledge and praxis on community building by incorporating our habit of learning from the past into an attitude of valuing the potentials within social settings and to create deep innovation through moving from ecosystem to ecosystem awareness. Scharmer 2007 proposes a 7-step process starting from identifying past patterns of problem solving, shifting one's sense to new perspectives and a broader picture, identifying new potentials of collective creativity, crystallizing new vision and prototyping new ideas. This process structure and the built-in transformation could be a model of a community psychology learning journey integrating the body of community psychology research and practice together with the wisdom of other disciplines. It also integrates the views of major actors such as economy, civil society, public institutions, which are needed to develop a systematic approach towards challenges in the community. Design thinking, one of the most radical transdisciplinary approaches on societal and community challenges, originally has been developed as an integrative and systematic approach towards product and service design. The concept of design thinking is a wonderful and impressive example of the potentials of a transdisciplinary approach towards social problems, developing a collaborative scheme for actors in society as well as linking different academic disciplines and praxis. Community psychology must readjust the traditional mode of community as local neighborhoods towards a systematic view of the role of community building in organizations, social networks, on the local level and beyond, and on the level of civil society, families, local communities, and organizations, both companies and NGOs. Thus, it is been necessary to develop a new and enhanced identity based on the field's core values, which is able to meet the challenges of a dynamic and globalized world. The steps described below, adapted from Wolf et al. 2006, may serve as a guideline for future research and action. Community psychology will become increasingly global in nature. This is why local communities are increasingly important because they are affected by global forces. Community psychology must collaborate with communities so they effectively adapt to such changes. A community psychology approach, by definition, must be an approach informed by multiple perspectives. Thus, the future of community psychology will require partnerships with other disciplines and community stakeholders. Community psychology will have to partner with others while maintaining its own unique identity. Community psychology will become more engaged in the formation and institutionalization of economic and social policy. These policies will be based upon the values that are at the core of our discipline and will incorporate psychological principles. Involvement with policy is consistent with community psychology's ecological perspective on community, which recognizes the importance of macrosystem factors such as business and policy on communities. Community psychology will become a field of research and action that makes a significant difference on issues of social change by promoting social justice. Social justice is defined as conditions that promote equitable distribution of resources, equal opportunity for all, non-exploitation, prevention of violence, and active citizenry. A community psychology linking science wants to unleash itself from the limits of traditional academic disciplines and taxonomies. Future innovations. Community psychology is still in its developing stage and holds tremendous potentials for success as an applied science. Although it has been called a linking science, establishment of this fact in the form of research and application to real life problems is much needed. Also, for community psychology to be a successful linking science, the field need to empower itself by using competencies to develop social innovations and focus on macro and micro issues of community building together with various partners. Transdisciplinary community interest groups need to be formed such that they include a rich body of knowledge and can assist on community building along with developing questions that address the future concern of our society. These kinds of programs could enhance the DSA skills of the field which are depicted in the figure below. To summarize, community psychology has had varied origins inspired by developments all over the globe and influences from a plethora of other disciplines. It is fundamentally different from traditional applied sciences and holds a unique but somewhat underrated position in the various disciplines of psychology. The linking metaphor is being used to describe how community psychology is an amalgam of values and ideas of many other fields. It links ideas together and applies them to research, and thus the research is applied to real life problems. The linking science metaphor is also the future direction in which community psychology can hope to develop into a prominent applied science. By focusing on past analysis and creative ideas of the future, this discipline aims at incorporating different fields and different levels of social structures under one umbrella term of community psychology. For community psychology to be successful, it must enhance its DSA skills, thus improve upon innovations, empowerment, and implementation respectively.
Work linking has been used as a metaphor. Community psychology is a linking science through and through. Not only does it seem to be an amalgam of ideas from various disciplines, it also links various relationships in a community which exist at various levels, that is, the levels of ecological analysis, and links it to the individual well being. Other than this, it also links various organizers and components of a community to help resolve community issues. For example, understanding that there is a lack of guidance among newlywed couples about pregnancy and protection may be resolved through assigning the role to a few elders in the community to guide the couples. As noted before, community psychology also links various disciplines together in itself. It adds that extra something needed for treatment from the concepts of social psychology in community and also from sociology and anthropology. It also takes applied research ideas from other fields to its own value based, action oriented form of research. Community psychology has been influenced by many developments in the past and many disciplines of science. It has taken a new shape in every country and every community. Thus, it presents itself as a unique applied science. We are mentioning here only a few movements that have influenced the discipline of community psychology, like community organizing by Alinsky in 1989, community mental health movement, Bloom 1973, conscientization, Freer 1996, action research, False Border 1991 in Latin America, Mari Jahoda's 1972 long term study on the effects of unemployment on the community, the Italian democratic psychiatry movement, Masaglia in 1968 in Europe, And many political movements, like the civil rights, students' movement of the 1960s, women's liberation, gays movements, equal rights for handicapped persons. It is important to understand that community psychology is born out of the need for something more than what would curb down the issues of humankind. It can be seen as a revolution, a movement that is still taking shape, which aims at eradicating mental health issues at their source. A disenchantment was seen with clinical treatment amongst researchers and people. Hospitalization did not always work, and many patients were rehospitalized. There were issues of stigma and inadequacy of clinical treatment. Thus, it was proposed at the Swampscott Conference in Boston to aim at approaching mental health through the community and aiming at resolution at the community level. This movement, also called the Third Revolution of Mental Health, soon spread all over the world, but tinted by the colors of the cultures it spread across. Community psychology is a transdisciplinary approach. It is the linking aspect of the science that makes it so. It takes the best of the various disciplines, their practices, and the views of the past and present, and applies it to the problems of the real world. It sounds like the perfect solution. Maybe it is. But a significant amount of research and practice is needed to make it an indispensable applied science. Major reasons why we call community psychology a linking science. Discovering empowerment patterns between individuals, groups, and social structures. Learning not only from the past, but sense emerging futures by learning across generations, cultures, and institutions. Establishing new intersectoral alliances and test new forms of collaboration between different actors in society. Enabling mutual risk taking through experimental settings and program evaluation. We see four aspects where it links strands from different sources and incorporates them into its own body of knowledge. In this way, it discovers patterns between social structures, assimilates learning from the past with the knowledge for the present, and expectations for the future. Along with these, it links varied actors of the society and ideas from the experimental setting to produce a holistic approach. Mentioned earlier, along with the forementioned reasons, here are two more additional ones that help explain the linking in the phrase a linking practice and how community psychology acts as one. Collaborating with other disciplines, societal institutions, business companies, or other actors in society in order to make a difference in the world. A shift in the traditional model of community as local neighborhoods towards a systemic view of the role of community building in organizations, real or virtual. Social networks on the local level and beyond, and on the level of civil society, that is, the citizen groups, local and global coalitions, and alliances. It not only merges the various institutions of the society, but also unites various disciplines to provide an approach that uses the best of all and provides to the world in a similar fashion. As a linking practice, community psychology also calls for a shift in the view of community from limited to local neighborhoods to one that associates community building practices with organizations, social networks, and civil societies. Community psychology is the need of the hour, but it is still in its developmental stages and needs enhancement of strategies and abilities such that it can be applied in the most practical way possible and most benefit can be extracted from such applications. It also needs inspiring community workers towards community building in order to develop feelings of social responsiveness and inclusion. These strategies need to be co created by community members, implemented and evaluated in order for them to be successful. The discipline has a strong value base. It needs to be applied on a larger scale. Traditional values of community psychology require more than working in a local community and or improving the social situation of specific groups. The field should empower itself, use its competencies to develop social innovations, and look at emerging futures by developing shared goals and collaborating with other disciplines. To teach and research the DSA of community psychology, there is a need for adequate institutional facilities through which a science society dialogue can be established. Innovations need to focus on the future and learn from the past, and infrastructural facilities need to be enhanced in order to establish discipline as a strong applied science. Presentation, we have gained an understanding of how and why community psychology is a linking science. If so, what all does it link in its attempt to understand and influence mental health care? And lastly, how it caters to community issues. We have also examined its multifaceted origin and how this conception makes it the potential to be unique and effective applied science. In the end, we also understood the future innovations required for the discipline to function as an applied science.